So what happens if you have autism, Asperger's, or a social disability that keeps you from communicating with people? Meaning conversations aren't working, you want to date, you want to connect with women, you want to connect with people, but you can't learn a form of a conversation to make it work. That's what we're talking about today on this tutorial. I'm Steve Mayeda. I'm the founder of Austin Men's Development and TSL Online. Check all that stuff out if you like it, and let's get started with today's podcast.
Hey guys, my name is Steve Mayeda and I'm a men's coach in Austin, Texas. I'm a BJJ practitioner, a Wim Hof enthusiast. I have an amazing family, 4 awesome boys and a beautiful wife. And what this podcast is about being the better man. What we talk about is tried and true because we've been doing it with groups of men just like you for over 12 years. Listen up, and I hope you enjoy.
What is happening, guys? Steve Mayeda here. We're in Austin, Texas. Welcome to this video. This is going to be a quick tutorial that we're doing on a technique that I call rapport cycling, but specifically for individuals who have social disabilities like autism or Asperger's, basically not being able to properly communicate, sense emotions, read social cues, and so on, yet at the same time you want to socialize. And the reason why I want to make this video is because people who have different social disabilities, and it's not just that, it's not just autism or Asperger's, can get very frustrated and confused and almost in denial of having this social disability. It's almost like a taboo that they don't want to have. Now, being a dating coach for 12 years, I know 100% about how unpleasant or how even repellent it can be to be titled as somebody who is autistic or has Asperger's or is on the spectrum. This is something that nobody wants to have. I just want to make this very clear that you should never be ashamed of this. And if you are unaware of you having these different social disabilities or not being able to communicate, you really need to fix them. You need to fix them with somebody who's trained, like a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, who is skilled in working with people who have these sort of social disabilities. Do not just try and find your solution in somebody that's a dating coach or somebody that doesn't get the full spectrum of it all. Now, I really want to move on to this tutorial. It'll be fairly quick and hopefully easy to explain, but I just want to let you know that I've worked with a ton of clients over the past decade plus who have autism or Asperger's. We've had great success. A lot of times I work directly with their therapist or psychologist, and we get good results. But there are also times where we work with somebody who has autism or Asperger's and they're in such denial and won't acknowledge that they have this sort of disability that it erupts into a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and so on. But let's get into this question. So this question actually comes from one of our private boards, our Men's Development Excellence boards, and somebody who has a social disability is learning how to connect with people. So in conversation, he's going up to strangers and wanting to connect. Now also, his goal is to date. His goal is to be able to meet a woman and gain a level of attraction with her. Now, somebody who does have a social disability, if you go and look at a lot of pickup or dating information, you can make a lot of mistakes. So you can be overly sexual, you could be disrespectful, you could move over different boundaries and so on. I would highly recommend that if you're not able to communicate with somebody, work with somebody who knows. And very specifically what I mean by that is talk to a therapist, talk to somebody who has experience in working with people who have a similar problem, and start there rather than just hiring some guy from the internet who's a dating coach who has pictures of him with a bunch of women around. It can get you in a lot of trouble, serious trouble. All right, let's get into this tutorial. Now, what we're gonna learn is a rapport cycle, which is a structured conversation with the idea that it will achieve rapport, it will achieve a connection, and it will see your guys' roles be defined within it. Now, it's very easy to learn, can get more complex, but we're gonna add a few things here. And so what a rapport cycle is, we're just asking a question that's based on something that we're wondering about. We're then gonna tell a story or perspective either from ourselves or a story or perspective from somebody else. So that's what we call a ground. And then we're gonna ask a question again, and usually what happens is we cycle through that a few times. And it's a very effective technique, a simple way to do this. is one thing that I started out doing back in like 2006, because there wasn't any material really on how to achieve rapport, was I would say something like, man, do you like art? They'd answer the question, yes or no, or be confused by it. And I'd say, well, look, I've worked as an artist for the past, 10 years. And to me, art means, X, Y, and Z and this and that. And I would explain it for maybe 10 seconds. And I'd say, so do you like something like that? Do you like art like that? And very simply, I was asking a question, then telling a perspective of myself, and then asking a question. And when it's coming from you, it's very easy to make that work. So in this situation, he says, hey, what does identity mean? Now, we get an answer back that might be confusion, that might be, why are you asking me this? All those things are actually fine, because so many times in a conversation, people aren't used to somebody coming up to us. Also, if our body language is a little bit off, if our tonality is a little bit off, meaning how we say the words, and hey, what do you think about identity? Or hey, what does identity mean to you? Or hey, what is that? Like all these different things, right? They might come off a little bit odd. And so somebody might be, oh, why are you asking me this? In fact, even when I do it, if I say like, hey, it's a random question, but what does identity mean to you? Basically, I might get, why are you asking me that question? So then you get some sort of answer back, but you continue on to the ground. And what he writes here is, we're always searching to define who we are. I'm trying to find out who I am and define that. Now, then he goes on to the next question. Did you have a moment of breakthrough about who you are and when? Now, these are very specific questions, and you in the audience might be thinking you can't ask a random stranger this. You absolutely can. But in this, we're actually going to clean up quite a bit. And what we're going to clean up here is very, very important, because it's something that a lot of guys, once again, who have some social disabilities are going to run into all the time. Having a social disability is not bad. It is a great thing. We just have to know where we start. And if not, we're usually in the wrong map, in the wrong terrain, and going in the wrong direction. So what I'm going to do to this is I'm not going to add much, okay? So just to repeat what he did, and I'll do it fairly quickly, it says, hey, what does identity mean? We're always searching to define who we are. I'm trying to find out and define who I am. Did you have a moment of breakthrough about who you are and when? What's going to make this work is there's a few things that are going to help, okay? So number one, I believe we should add what's called a buffer to the beginning of this. And a buffer is just something that I actually demoed when I was demoing this. It's just like, hey, it's kind of a weird question, but I want to ask you. Now, the definition of a buffer is actually adding something before whatever we're going to say, like a question or a ground. We're going to add something to it beforehand to be like, this is kind of odd, or this might be weird. And what that does is, one, it allows the conversation to naturally go there, but it can build a little bit of intrigue too. So it's a very useful tool. In fact, I would say a buffer is an amazing, amazing tool for you to start integrating in all of your conversations. And if you watch more of my tutorials, you're going to find a lot of these. So basically, if I said, hey, this is an odd question, but what does identity mean to you? And that's what I would add in that first question. Now, I would also work on your delivery, work in front of the mirror and so on, but then we get whatever answers and we say, it means a lot, or why are you asking me this? Or I don't know, I've never thought about that. We're going to continue on to the ground. And what he writes is, we're always searching to define who we are. I'm trying to find out and define who I am. Now, let's try and understand this in the ground, because this is very important. Number one, I'm going to add a buffer again to it, okay, which is very easy, and you can almost use this to any ground that you want to buffer, right? But I'm also going to add at the very end of this the direction that I want to go in. So I'm going to show a bias, all right? I'm going to show why this is important to me. And then I'm going to ask directly to them what it means. And this is very important, because a lot of times when we're giving a ground and then asking a question right after that, we get advice or we get people detached from us. And in fact, I came up with this very addition while working with one of my best clients ever, who has a pretty high level of Asperger's, and he's married now. He's great. It's amazing. It's an amazing life he has. And I worked with him at a very late age too, and he thought all things were hopeless. A lot of guys in the dating industry had turned him away, and even the hard case coaches said he was too hard of a case and so on. but he was also willing to work with me, and that was a big deal. Okay, so one of the things here that I'm gonna add, and this made a lot of sense to them, and it makes a lot of sense to my clients who I work with who do have something like Asperger's or autism, is I wanna just add that buffer. We're gonna keep the ground just as how you wrote it. There's nothing wrong with that, but then we're gonna give it a little bit of a direction, a little bit of a bias. Like, this is why I wanna know it. And then we're gonna directly ask them how it affects their life. And that's very important. Like, it's gotta be towards them. So we're gonna add those three things. So basically, if we just went back to it and say, hey, it's a weird question. What does identity mean to you? They kind of give us of whatever answer they give. And then we're gonna basically say, okay, the reason why I'm asking this, that's the buffer. Okay, the reason why I'm asking this. And it's gotta have that feeling that, it's like, hey, I understand this is a weird question. You might not understand it fully, but I'm gonna get to my point and I'm gonna share my story with it. That's really what that buffer is telling with your body language and your tonality. And that's what you should work for. So then we say, the reason why I'm asking this is we're all searching to define who we are. And I'm trying to find out who I am. And I think that's really important because we don't communicate that much with each other. So now I'm giving it meaning and direction. So there's a bias of why I'm asking this question. So specifically, I'm adding that line in there so that I can say something along the lines of like, you know what? I think it's important because everybody thinks this, but we never talk about it. Okay, so we're really giving meaning to that. And that's one thing that is missing from it. In your original ground, you tell your story, which is good. But now you're kind of giving why you're telling that story. And if you don't understand it, that's fine. Let's get functional with the line I'm giving you. Let's go back to the ground and we say like, the reason why I'm asking this is we're all searching to define who we are. And I'm trying to find out who I am. And I think that's important because all of us care about it, yet we don't really talk about it. So I really want to know this from you. Very simple, right? I just added those two things to it, and it's going to make a world of difference of how people pay attention to you. Now, if something goes wrong there, it could be your delivery, it could be the person's situation, it could be the wrong environment. There's all sorts of different reasons of why it's not working, but we're trying to maximize the verbals of that. Now we can fire the ending or the question, the final question, what I call the challenge question, and you say, did you have a moment or breakthrough about who you are and when? Now, I think this is a little bit too complex to get to in the beginning, but it's not bad. Definitely along the right idea. What I feel is that you should be asking something a little bit more simple and something more immediate. Okay, so just to make this clear, I want you to understand something I want you to be asking something that's easy for them to remember and access, and it's not a lot of pressure. Pressure here is going to turn people into a little bit of a flight or fight mechanism, or just wanting to eject out of the situation. So we want something easy. Now, most likely this will continue on to another cycle, but it's going to go something like this. So we get to that final question and we say, you know what? I'm wondering what makes you today really know who you are. Now, that may be a tough question, but it's introspective. People can grab onto it. They may have to think about it, and they most likely will not be able to answer it because it is tough, but it's engaging. Now, as I wrote in this comment to the gentleman who posted this question, what's important about this is that we build a connection in a conversation. So we don't necessarily want a result to the answer to that question. We want a result of them conversing with us. So it's good to continue the cycle on. So what this might go like from the beginning is like, hey, I know this is a weird question. That's the buffer, but is identity important to you? That's the initial question. Then they answer in whatever ways they do. We sit back and we listen, and then we say, look, the reason why I'm asking, buffer, the reason why I'm asking is because identity is something that we're always searching for. We're always searching to define ourselves. And I'm trying to find out who I am. And I think that's important because we never really discuss that. That's my bias, my leading in that direction. And now I'm going to deliver it directly to her. Or you could ask a man this, it doesn't matter. You should be talking to everybody. So I say, I really want to know what you think. Really want to know what you think. Now I'm going to ask the simplified challenge question. Look, is there something that happened to you today that really made you know who you are? Now, I know that's going to be confusing possibly to answer, but check this out. I'm just going to add something called listing of threes, which are 3 easy memories for somebody to get. And I know this may sound very complex, but man, how simple or how quickly this works is it's just great. And this should really solidify a conversation. So I might say, like, so when was it today that you really felt solid, like with who you are? Like, for instance, you know, when you woke up and did your morning routine, or you talked to one of your best friends, or perhaps, you know, you performed really well at your job or school. Like, did you have something like that? So very simple memories for them to latch onto to go, huh. Once again, they may not answer that question, but what's important is they're engaged in your conversation and they're thinking about it in their head. And then you could continue on with the rapport cycle with another ground. You could say, so for me, like I said, I'm searching for that, but a lot of times that might be with my beliefs about life, or a lot of times that might be with my friends and the unity that we have. The important thing is that you are sharing a part of yourself and they're sharing a part of themselves, and you're communicating, connecting, and it means something to each other. And when that starts happening, we build rapport and connection. Here's the thing, guys. You know, if you have a social disability, don't be ashamed of it. Learn to communicate with it. Now, I'm giving advice towards it, but part of my advice in working with a social disability is work with a professional who deals with this, like a therapist, like a psychologist or psychiatrist. Don't deny it. Don't run from it. And again, if you have something that's drastically getting in the way of your communication with people, if you don't fix this, then no amount of dating advice will work. And so we really want to take into consideration the things that we have advantages with and the things we have disadvantages with. Hope you enjoyed this, guys. If you want to get in on the discussion, join our free men's group on Facebook, Austin Men's Development. And of course, we have our upper tiers like Men's Development Excellence, where this gentleman is on and posting and got, this post within hours, there's over 20 responses of guys helping him out who've been there. That is just very, very cool. So there's a lot of things that we have as tools that will really help you as a man grow, that are inside the dating realm, but also outside of that as well. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you guys soon.